Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 128th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, which will just follow the previous episode, like a sort of a revelation I just had, we will talk about beliefs and how beliefs can influence gravity. So, this is going to be, I'm going to revisit something that is in the spiritual sort of circles. There's this idea, even in spiral dynamics, for instance, if you know spiral dynamics, that's something you should check out. A very interesting field that looks at the evolution of humanity. And basically it says that the influence of people as they ascend the spiral of, towards higher levels, their level of influence increases exponentially. So somebody that, for instance, believes in ecology, for instance, is carries more weight in terms of its influence over reality than somebody that is still living in the jungle in survival. Because the person that is within ecology has gone through an evolution of his view of the world, which is expanded. Now, spiral dynamics examines the influence of humans over society in general, like the impact you have over society. Then you have in the spiritual circles, for instance, the fact that it would only take 1% of the population to awaken, quote unquote, to go to transition, basically to transition out of this planetary womb and to ascend, whatever, and then bring all of humanity out or ascending. And in this video, I'm going to explain why that is. So, in the previous video, I explained that basically gravity is just the weight of the future. If you understand that reality is just black holes nested inside one another, nested within each other in a certain logic, and a black hole is basically light, a photon. And the relative weight of the black hole is how much of the future it controls. So let's say that you have a black hole. This is the singularity, the point where everything where everything collapses back into one single point, and it exerts an influence over everything that surrounds it. For instance, if you have a neighboring black hole, and this is like the overlap of the future that they may have in common. And so basically it's like reality is just nested black holes, one within the other, and the relative force of gravity that each black hole has and can then thus pull other black holes towards its future depends on how much of the future it controls. What does that mean? Well, for instance, and that's where humans come into play, which is really, really important, and why only 1% could, quote unquote, save humanity. If you're a human and your belief is that there's only scientific materialism, only science is true, and that the IPCC or whatever, I can't remember, the report of those experts that say that there's going to be climate change and all that stuff, and that humanity is doomed, and that temperature is going to go above 1.5 degrees or 2 and whatever. If you believe that all that is the only and absolute truth, it's as if you are a black hole, of course, everything is a black hole. You're just a pocket of self-contained light, basically. And what you see of your body is just an interface. It's just a visual representation of the influence you have over reality, which translates into your body. And so essentially humans are like conscious gravity, you could even say. Conscious gravity. And whenever you pick up an object, just imagine that you are like a black hole that can influence the future of everything you touch around you. Normally everything is falling, straight into its future based on the laws of physics, like an object, for instance, like, I don't know, like a cup or a ball or whatever. And what you have the power to do is to pull it out of its future, of its predestined future, and make it do things that it would never have done if you didn't touch it. So we have the conscious ability to manipulate gravity and to manipulate the future, basically. That's what we're doing. To expand the timeline of all the objects around us. And why can we pick up, why is it, for instance, easier to pick up a cup? Well, it's, for instance, it doesn't have that much weight in terms of, it's also a self-contained black hole, and its weight is not as important as yours, because your black hole is just immense. Its sphere of influence, its weight is immense compared to that cup. Eventually, because obviously this is really important, believing in scientific materialism actually limits the power of your conscious gravity over things, because you subscribe to this notion that things are heavy or whatever. And when you look at ancient civilizations and some of the things that they built, like the Mayans and those stones, that are like so closely arranged that it looks like they were levitated into place rather than carried, or even the pyramids or whatever, then you understand that actually, if you get rid of these beliefs and you don't believe in Newtonian physics, then perhaps we could levitate things, and that is just like discovering basically your conscious power over gravity as a human, because you are also a black hole falling into a future, and your weight depends on your belief system. So again, let's say, I know this is hard to understand, but let's say this is you as a human. This is you. You're a black hole, and this is all the possible futures. All your possible futures. And you're falling into it. But if you believe only strictly in materialist science, it's almost as if you reduce all the possibilities that could ever exist of what you could do to this tiny little funnel right here. That's all. Whereas here, this is, all of the other quote unquote possibilities where you also understand that monotheism is true, where you also understand spirituality, where you integrate all of the possible futures, and you consciously realize that all of them can be true, all of them are yourself. So if you expand your belief system, you also expand all the potential possible futures that you could experience. And therefore, that's why, basically, if 1% of the population awakens, I don't really like the term awakens, but simply expands their beliefs, their relative weight in terms of their gravity increases exponentially compared to someone that only believes in materialist science, and there's this tiny little fund right here. And that's what they believe the future is going to be. And then, so obviously, when it comes to which future will be experienced, you carry more weight, so everything will start gravitating towards you and around you. And so that's why, like this 1%, just think of this plane and everybody is falling into the future and has certain gravity, and they create like a little dent here in space-time, like you've seen, like whoops, boops, boops, boops. And they create a little dent here. That's their sphere of influence over the future, and it attracts anything that comes into its surroundings and then goes in that direction. But if you have really truly awakened, then what happens is this. You create such deformation of space-time, of the fabric of space-time, because your beliefs now are so expanded that this is completely like break through here, and everything starts falling towards your future, because your future is now carries more weight. It is bigger, it is more expansive, it has more possibilities. And that is a vision I had actually when I had my spiritual awakening. I thought I was going crazy. I called my wife and I said, I think I'm going to disappear into and like suck all of reality around me into myself or something. I don't know. I was just going completely, I didn't know what was happening to me, so obviously. But this is a true phenomenon. And anyone that has had a spiritual awakening will tell you that they do find themselves like if they were in a new reality, where suddenly they discover that more and more people are interested in spirituality, where suddenly they see more and more things, more and more signs that, more people are spiritual. But that's because you have fallen into a future which starts to influence everything that's around you, all of your reality. And it's almost as if you were attracting, like for instance, this guy, right? There's a version of himself that would remain in scientific materialism, and then you go straight into his future in that direction, and like die in 50 years from climate change and something. Okay, but now, because you have spiritually awakened, you have expanded your beliefs. Now you're sucking that version of him out of that kind of potential, and he's kind of falling towards you, gravitating towards your reality. And you don't even have to do anything. You don't even have to like start awakening people or convincing them or whatever. It is just that, gravity is gravity. The weight of your beliefs and you falling into a future that is much more expansive and carries much more weight already does all of the job, like 90% of the job. The other percent is just like a little, it's just like easing this ride or this slide towards you, just like, how should I say, getting rid of a little bit of resistance maybe. But it's not gonna completely most of the job is you expanding your belief systems, basically. And so, so now I think you understand why. This is one of the other things that I wanted to say. What I found myself into also when I had my spiritual awakening is this idea that everything is true. Now, when you are in that kind of state, you may think that now your force of gravity is infinite, because now you've expanded this to infinity, right? Wrong, because here we are in the relative. And what you're doing is almost you're taking yourself out of relative and you're going into the absolute. But infinities have no place in the relative. And so what you become is a baby. How much influence does the baby have over the future? A baby carries almost no weight. No weight at all. It's weightless. Its weight is given to him by his parents. Projected beliefs onto him, which then the baby inherits, and his force of gravity then becomes whatever society, parents, or whatever, what he has ingested as beliefs. And so that's why you have, stories of people that from generation to generation are, wealthy or whatever. What happens is you get a transfer of beliefs. So if the parents transfer the right belief systems to the baby as it grows up, and it believes in like in itself, in its own infinite potential, and has very expanded belief systems, then it will have that person will have in life a much stronger gravity and therefore much more influence over reality than others. But again, so if you've awakened spiritually and you're in this everything is true kind of thing, then your weight is actually lessened. You're actually weightless. And basically what you're doing is you're surrendering your gravity and just going with majority vote, let's just say. It's like voting, how do you say that? Voting white, a blank ballot or something? I don't remember. Like basically it's like your vote doesn't count. Because you're just saying, well, whatever the current consensus mainstream belief is, I'll follow that. Because you're weightless. Now, choosing out of infinity a certain beliefs nevertheless, which are not infinite, but which are still more expansive than this, materialist vision, that is what gives you more weight. You're not in infinity, but you're not as restricted as science and materialism. And I think if you've followed all the videos of the channel, you start to get an idea of my sets of beliefs and understand that basically even this video that I'm explaining right now it's almost like as if your gravity becoming conscious of its own gravity, a black hole becoming conscious of its own influence over reality. And that is a very, very important kind of step, because obviously, so long as you are doing things unconsciously, then your weight is limited by your consciousness. It's as if you had an entire body and you were only conscious of an arm. And you didn't know that this existed, this rest of the body. And it was just there, it was just dead. It was just like, dangling around or whatever. And all you're doing is moving this arm around. Well, your power over reality is going to be extremely limited. But imagine now your consciousness expands to integrate everything. Now you have the real power over reality, which is so much bigger. Yeah, and so basically, yeah, that's one of the traps that one should not fall into. If you want to know what kind of beliefs I've chosen, well, I mean, it would take too long to explain, but basically it's this whole on philosophy kind of thing. It's this whole that the idea that humanity should form a collective global organism, that's what we're called to do anyways. And from there, it's almost like the living cell. It's almost like we are all like a protein, an amino acid, every single human is like a part of a living cell. And once we find harmony, it's almost as if all of these parts click together and it forms the living cell. Now, the living cell, as I've explained in previous videos, is like a universal building block for assembling plenty of structures of light, like animals, plants, humans, whatever. Life, basically. It's like this key structure that can that allows for the forms or entities or beings that are in an etheric form, that are not material yet, to come into material reality. So you have to imagine that basically before the emergence of life, everything, like in the astral plane was filled with animals and plants and whatever, or chimeras, dragons, unicorns, whatever. And then life comes, and then the form that the living cell takes is almost like a discriminatory process of saying, well, the unicorn, that's not the dragon. They'll probably not be able to come down and, and exist in physical reality as they are. But I'm so balanced as life that I will allow for all of this experimentation to go on, for predators and prey, the relationship between all the different plants and blah, 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 because it allows for the emergence of the human, which is the bridge between biology and the world of pure thought and ideas. And why am I saying that humanity has to form a harmonious collective global organism? It's because we are supposed to be a kind of cell for structuring the world of pure thought or pure concepts or pure ideas. And that's what we're given to harmonize. Basically, when you have oppositions such as communism versus capitalism, or good versus evil, or tyranny versus democracy, or freedom versus, determinism. All of these are pure concepts, pure thought, that for the moment are, it's almost like they're fighting against each other. They want to kill or cancel each other out. But humans have the possibility to create harmony out of this, and then the world of thought can start experiencing itself as conscious thought. So a thought becoming conscious of itself, having an experience that is, something that is indescribable from the human perspective, because we can think about democracy, we cannot imagine what it would be like for an embodied thought form that is conscious of itself, like a conscious talking, walking, talking democracy, or the embodiment of that experiencing itself. And that is just one thing. I mean, there's just so many other pure thoughts and concepts that can start experiencing themselves through, but it requires humans to form a collective global organism and to sort all of these things out in their own minds. And so that's the kind of future I'm aiming to, which is almost infinity, just like I'm saying the living cell. So this, let's go back here. So let's just say that there's these elements here that are bound to form the living cell one time or another, and they're interacting with each other. Okay? Here is this idea of the living cell that exists in a potential future, and all the other potential futures is just more of the same, like just proteins and amino acids doing their thing, and it goes nowhere. It just spirals down again. It's like, this is like the dimension, you could say, of chemistry, and it goes nowhere. And the living cell is the portal to go to a totally new experience, which we call life, which is biology. And in here, you have, you're human, you have jellyfish, you have all kinds of things. You have, fish. Jesus. There you go. You have all kinds of things. But they are non-manifest yet. Now, what kind of future do you think has more weight, carries more weight? The one where you just believe you're a separate a separate and protein, separate amino acid that just does its thing and reacts and battles, has to react passively or whatever with other molecules, or one where you form a collective global organism, which is a living cell, and then that expands reality infinitely. That, to me, is like a gateway towards, it's like if infinity basically structured itself in layers, so that you can experience chunks of infinity at a time. And in order to transition from one chunk of infinity to the other, you have to pass through these key portals. Portals. Because if you transition into this realm without going through this portal, it'll be too much for you to handle. You're just going to get lost in infinity. And that would happen to humans, for instance. How would that present itself? Well, imagine if tomorrow any single one of your thoughts becomes reality. Well, how quickly do you think we'd destroy ourselves? I would say quite quickly. But going through this portal of humanity forming a global collective organism, the planet becoming conscious of itself, is like this key portal for structuring the world of thought and ideas and not mess things up, because you understood this whole concept of harmony. And so that's kind of my sets of belief, and that gives me access, or that carries the weight of all the potential that lies in this other dimension, which is infinitely more, which carries infinitely more weight than a scenario which is like, there's climate change and blah, 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 and humanity fizzles out, and then back to biology, humans die and evolution starts again, and, we create a civilization out of rats, and, I don't know. I mean, that is a tiny, 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 tiny future potential compared to the future potential of humanity forming a collective global organism and transitioning into this new dimension where suddenly you can access a whole new magnitude within infinity. Not infinity yet as such, but just expanding more into infinity. Like I said, you have these layers to get to infinity. And if you listen to my previous videos, don't worry, we're still very far from infinity as such. So humans forming a collective global organism is a planet becoming conscious of itself. Then you have to have humanoid civilizations that arrange into a harmonious whole that will form a solar system becoming conscious of itself, and then solar systems are interacting with other solar systems will create a conscious galaxy, then a conscious cluster of galaxies, then conscious universe, and then a conscious multiverse. And once you get to a conscious multiverse, then infinity becomes aware of its infinite nature, and the whole experience it's like a bubble that pops into itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but a bubble that pops into itself, yeah. And then, you can start again from there. And that's in, trillions and billions and trillions of years. Because right here, we're still at the very start. So you get the picture of picking your belief systems. And it doesn't mean that you have to subscribe to mine, but just having a belief system that is more expansive than this materialist vision of reality, or even monotheism, for instance, is also very restrictive. Carries much more weight. You carry more weight. You influence the future much more than other people. And it's not a competition, but understand that in any case, that's what's beautiful about this, is that to carry more weight, you have to be benevolent. Because if you're malevolent, you are restricting even more the funnel of potential futures. And that's why positive thoughts are much more powerful than negative. Why? Not because negative thoughts are bad and positive thoughts are good, but simply because of how gravity works in this sense. It is that when you have negative thoughts, you are restricting the funnel of possible futures, because you're how should I say, you're collapsing your own futures into a pessimistic view, of like, oh, I'm doomed, I'll never make it, blah, 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 blah. Negative thought is always contracting your future and contracting your sphere of influence. Whereas positive thoughts, suddenly you feel everything is possible. So you've expanded all your possibilities. Suddenly you feel like you could do anything. You feel like you could fly to the other side of the world. You feel like you can jump into the sky. You feel like you can do anything. And that's also what you learn in sports, for instance. It's the athletes that are the most enthusiastic or whatever, and that have the most positive thinking, that, just have more weight during the game in influencing the outcome of the game. But that's an attitude more than an aptitude, more than a competence. It's an attitude. So if you can remain in that feeling of anything is possible, well, not anything, but you get my picture, like you feel subjectively like anything is possible because you're in that kind of positive vibe, then you carry more weight. And so in any case, that's why the positive quote unquote, is always stronger than the negative, and will overpower the negative, or love stronger than fear, if you want to call it that. It is just because of this phenomenon and mechanism of how gravity works. And that's why positive thoughts carry more weight than negative ones, because they're expansive in the terms of like all the possible futures that you can experience from that state of mind, as opposed to when you're in a negative state of mind. So if you want to kill all of humanity, you're trying to collapse all of the other people's future. And the only way that you can have influence is if people resonate and join you in your negative thought. And that's what, kind of like the Hitler story. But again, you can see that there was a will for humanity of resisting that, and just see who won between Hitler and the US and Europe and whatever. So that's also very encouraging, that basically if you have negative thoughts, that's all right, because your weight over the future and over reality actually diminishes. So I hope you found this video interesting. This was just, again, an improvisation from just this intuition of how your beliefs are related to your influence over gravity. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments, feel free, and talk to you in the next video.